Have you ever wondered why, despite all your efforts to become a better person, the feeling of being incomplete never goes away? Why, even after reading self-help books, watching motivational videos, and trying every possible technique to heal yourself, you still feel like there's something wrong with you? Perhaps you think you haven't meditated enough, haven't done enough therapy, or haven't reached the ideal level of productivity. But what if I told you that this idea that you need to be fixed is the true source of your suffering? It's hard to hear. We have been conditioned to believe that there is an ideal to be achieved, a flawless self, free of trauma, free of anguish. And all your discomfort seems to stem from the fact that you haven't gotten there yet. But Alan Watts, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, would tell you something radical. Stop trying to fix yourself. Not because there is no pain or confusion within you, but because the very notion that you are broken is an illusion created by a culture that doesn't understand the nature of the human mind. You weren't born hating yourself. You learned to see yourself as defective, and worse, you began to believe that with enough effort, discipline, and self-knowledge, you could erase what you feel, transform who you are, and become a better person. But the truth that few have the courage to say, is that this ideal will never be achieved, because it doesn't exist. And the more you chase it, the further away from yourself you become. Watts clearly saw what many therapists, coaches, and spiritual leaders ignore. The obsession with self-improvement is a disguised form of self-denial. It is the constant attempt to escape from yourself, to control life, to avoid chaos, imperfection, the unexpected. But life cannot be controlled. It is not a machine with interchangeable parts. It is a flow, a process, and you are part of that process. You are not separate from it. You are not a flaw in the system. You are the system itself manifesting. This desperate quest to become a better person, calmer, more spiritual, more productive, more healed, is what distances you from the only thing you truly need: to accept who you are now, just as you are, without spiritual makeup, without motivational narratives, without needing to pretend that you have overcome everything. If you are tired of living in this eternal race against yourself, feeling that no matter how hard you fight, you never get there, this video is for you. It is not a promise of a quick fix. It is an invitation to confrontation, a call to dismantle the illusion that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. Because maybe, just maybe, you have never been broken, and all you needed was to stop trying to fix yourself. Think for a moment. Who exactly is this you that believes you are broken? And who is this other you that wants to fix you? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you live in war with yourself? Why is there a part of you that constantly judges, criticizes, demands, while the other just tries to survive, seeking some relief, some approval, some moment of peace? Alan Watts clearly identified what lies behind this inner battle: an illusory division between a judging self, the supposed rational, spiritualized. Think for a moment. Who exactly is this you that believes you are broken? And who is this other you that wants to fix you? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you live in war with yourself? Why is there a part of you that constantly judges, criticizes, demands, while the other just tries to survive, seeking some relief, some approval, some moment of peace? Alan Watts clearly identified what lies behind this inner battle: an illusory division between a judging self, the supposed rational, spiritualized, disciplined adult, and an imperfect self, childish, uncontrolled, that needs to be repressed, corrected, and shaped. This split is a deeply rooted cultural construct in the Western mindset. From a young age, we are taught that our raw, spontaneous, and emotional nature is a problem to be solved. The body needs to be tamed. The mind needs to be disciplined. Desires need to be overcome. In other words, the human being needs to be fixed. But here is the central point of Watts's critique. This division is a lie. There is no isolated higher self capable of manipulating and correcting another lower self. This structure is a fiction created by language, religious morality, and institutionalized psychology. A fiction that fragments us, that tears us away from the direct experience of life and places us in a position of eternal conflict. You are not two entities in dispute. You are a whole. One consciousness trying to survive in a world that has taught you to hate yourself. Western culture has built this dualistic model, soul and body, reason and emotion, light and shadow, as if they were opposing forces waging an internal battle. But in Watts's view, influenced by Zen, Taoism, and Eastern philosophy, this is absurd. You cannot tear pieces of yourself away and expect to be at peace. You cannot win a war where the enemy is you. This constant attempt to tame your impulses, polish your emotions, control your thoughts, and be better is like trying to lift yourself by pulling your own hair. It is a logical illusion, a cycle that only persists because you believe you are two things at once: the problem and the solution, the sinner and the savior, the sick and the doctor. This division forces you to live in permanent judgment. Every thought is analyzed, every emotion is labeled, every behavior is compared to an unattainable ideal. And the more you try to obey this logic, the further you distance yourself from your own nature. The result? Chronic anxiety, feelings of inadequacy, silent guilt, the sense that no matter how hard you try, it is never enough. Watts invites us to break this cycle. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. From the moment you are born, a subtle, almost imperceptible process of psychological domestication begins. Society, like a well-oiled machine, has its own standards for how you should think, act, and even feel. If you stray from these standards, you are corrected. If you do not learn, you are punished. And if you continue to be misaligned, you are excluded. It is in this context that the idea is born that you are not enough as you are. And more than that, that there is an ideal you that must be achieved no matter the cost. Alan Watts saw with brutal clarity how this logic extended into the realms of spirituality and modern psychology. He denounced a system that, under the guise of self-knowledge, merely reinforces social conditioning. The personal development industry, books, courses, coaches, gurus, thrives on selling the promise that there is something wrong with you that needs to be fixed, that your happiness lies in a future that has not yet arrived, that inner peace will come after you conquer your flaws, your traumas, your sabotaging mind. But here is the paradox that Watts exposes. The attempt to become a better person is based on the premise that you are broken. And this belief is the root of suffering. The more you try to change yourself to reach an ideal, the more you reinforce the idea that you are unworthy of the now. And thus, the cycle of dissatisfaction is established. You seek a solution to a problem that only exists because it was invented by the very search. It is a sophisticated trap. The coach tells you that you need to be more disciplined. The psychologist shows you that your mind is full of limiting beliefs. The spiritual master tells you to silence your thoughts and vibrate higher. And what all of this communicates, at its core, is that your current condition is unacceptable, that something in you needs to be adjusted, that your present experience, with all its pain, anger, fear, or confusion, is a mistake to be corrected. The problem is that you believe it. You internalize this narrative as if it were true, and you start to live in pursuit of an ideal self that never arrives. You compare yourself to influencers who always seem happy, calm, and balanced. You become frustrated because you still feel anxiety, still get irritated, still fail. And without realizing it, you turn personal growth into yet another form of self-loathing. Watts warns us that even spiritual practices, when misunderstood, can become traps. When you meditate to get rid of thoughts, you are trying to exclude a part of yourself. When you do yoga to control the mind, you are feeding the same neurotic desire for dominance. Even silence can become another way of shouting, "I am not enough." Western culture has turned becoming into an obsession. We are always trying to become something, more productive, happier, more enlightened. But as Watts taught, real transformation is not a project to be executed. It is a natural consequence of acceptance. And this brings us to a breaking point. Perhaps your defects are not flaws. Perhaps they are not obstacles to your evolution. Perhaps they are the very expression of life flowing through you. And this is what we will unravel next. Prepare to face a truth that could turn everything upside down. Your problems may have never been problems at all. We have been conditioned to believe that there is something within us that needs to be eliminated, that our negative thoughts, chaotic emotions, and impulsive behaviors are deviations from the path, failures, cracks in the psychic structure. And so we live as if we are always trying to rid ourselves of parts of ourselves, as if there were a secret manual for how a functional human being should be. But Alan Watts invites us to question this narrative at its root. What if those parts we reject, which we consider sick, are actually legitimate expressions of life itself? In Watts' view, deeply influenced by Zen, Taoist philosophy, and existential psychology, human nature is not a defective system waiting for correction. Human nature is life itself, contradictory, mutable, imperfect, and precisely for that reason, authentic. Just as waves are part of the ocean, your emotional fluctuations, your contradictory impulses, your behavioral failures are natural ripples of being. They are parts of the whole, not distortions to be eliminated. You don't see a river and try to rip out its curves. You don't look at a crooked tree and say it is wrong. You don't blame a cloud for changing shape. But when you look at yourself, you expect linearity, predictability, and permanent balance. Why? Because you were told that is how you should be, because you were taught to live against your own nature. Watts asserted that suffering does not come from difficult emotions themselves, but from the desperate attempt to resist them. The problem is not feeling anger. The problem is thinking that feeling anger is unacceptable. It is not being afraid. It is judging fear as weakness. It is not being confused. It is hating yourself for being confused. Every time you reject a part of yourself, you distance yourself from the totality of who you are. And the more you try to polish yourself, the more you fragment, the more you disconnect. There is a crucial difference between suffering and pain. Pain is part of existence. Suffering arises from the resistance to pain. When you surrender to the flow of experience, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, it completes its cycle and passes. But when you fight against it, when you try to suppress, control, ignore, or transcend, it becomes chronic, it takes root, and it dominates. Watts saw this resistance as a reflection of the Western mind, which seeks to control everything it does not understand. But life, he said, is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be experienced. And you are not an object to be fixed. You are an organism in constant motion, in constant expression. Your defects are often attempts by your being to adjust, to communicate, to survive in a world that rejects you. This perspective requires courage, because accepting your anger, your sadness, your indecision, your melancholy means making space for everything you have spent your life trying to avoid. It means stopping pretending that everything is fine. It means stopping hiding behind the mask of toxic positivity. But it is in this raw, vulnerable, real space that true transformation happens. Not the transformation that comes from effort, but the one that comes from acceptance. And it is precisely there that the next step of our journey lies. How, according to Watts, true transformation can only happen when you stop trying to change, when you surrender, when you abandon the search and allow life to simply happen through you, without filters, without masks, without judgments. In the next part, we will dive into this paradox, how the deepest change happens precisely when you give up trying to change, and why accepting yourself wholly is the most revolutionary gesture you can make. You have been educated to distrust yourself, to distrust your body, your instincts, your emotions, to believe that your rational mind is the only reliable authority to guide your life. And thus, the illusion of control was born. The idea that if you think enough, plan precisely, and monitor every aspect of your experience, you can finally live in peace. But the truth is brutal. The more you try to control life, the more anxious, frustrated, and disconnected you become. Alan Watts said that control is the great delusion of the modern mind. We try to control thought, emotions, behavior, the future, the past, others, everything. But we ignore the obvious. Life is not controllable. And more than that, you, as a living phenomenon, are already controlled by an intelligence much deeper than your conscious mind can comprehend. Your body breathes without you needing to command it. Your heart beats on its own. Your eyes adjust to light automatically. Your nervous system coordinates billions of impulses per second without any intervention on your part. You are a spontaneous manifestation of nature, a process, not a machine. And yet your mind insists on taking the wheel as if it were the supreme commander of a ship that is already sailing perfectly. This arrogance of thought creates tension, guilt, and suffering, because the mind is limited. It operates in dualities, concepts, and judgments. It sees problems where there are none. It interprets natural waves of emotion as failures, and by trying to correct what is merely an expression of life, it generates conflict. Watts saw this clearly. The mind is a tool, not a master. And when the tool becomes the commander, you live in permanent exhaustion. The solution? Detach from obsessive mental effort and trust in the wisdom of the moment. Trust in the flow of life that pulses within you, even if your mind does not understand. This does not mean becoming an apathetic, passive, or alienated being. It means learning to act from presence, not compulsion. It means making peace with the now, with everything it brings: joy, pain, confusion, silence, chaos, beauty. When you surrender to the present moment, something changes. The need for control begins to crumble. You realize that you do not need to master the mind to live in peace. You need to stop fighting with it. You do not need to improve yourself to deserve love. You need to stop rejecting yourself. You begin to realize that the answers you have been seeking are in your own experience here and now, beyond the reach of rational analysis. They are in the breath, in the body, in the space between thoughts, in the silence. This is the essence of what Watts called the wisdom of the body. Trusting that just as the universe knows how to form a star, your organism knows how to live. You just need to get out of the way. You just need to stop resisting, to interrupt the natural flow by trying to correct nature. But the mind does not give up easily. Even when you start to understand all of this, it tries to turn this surrender into yet another project. Now, I will practice acceptance. I will strive not to strive. And so, even surrender becomes another game of control. That is why, in the next part, we will dive into this disconcerting paradox. How true transformation happens when you give up trying to change. How real change is born from the abandonment of the idea of transformation. And why only when you stop swimming against the flow do you finally begin to be carried by the current of life. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Here is one of the most challenging and liberating ideas that Alan Watts offers us. True transformation does not happen through the effort to change, but precisely when you completely abandon the attempt to transform yourself. In other words, the deepest change occurs when you stop trying to change. This sounds absurd to Western logic, which has been shaped around goals, discipline, self-control, and meritocracy. But the truth is that on this path of obsession with fixing and perfecting, you are just spinning in circles within your own mental prison. Think about how many times you have tried to change a habit, an emotion, a thought pattern. How many promises have you made to yourself? How many this time for sure? And how many times did all of that crumble after a few days, weeks, or even hours? It's not because you are weak, undisciplined, or broken. It's because you are using the wrong tools to deal with something that is not a defect, but a natural process. Watts called this the law of reverse effort. The more you try to float, the more you sink. The more force you put into controlling, the more out of control you feel. This doesn't mean you should surrender to inertia or live carelessly. It means you need to change the starting point of your transformation. Stop starting from self-hatred, rejection, the attempt to fix, and begin from radical acceptance. Change not because you hate yourself, but because you love yourself enough not to continue harming yourself. The attempt to change based on judgment and denial is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. You create more tension, more resistance, more guilt. And that guilt throws you back into the cycle of self-criticism. But when you let go, when you stop trying to be someone else, something opens up. Something new, alive, unexpected. You begin to realize that transformation is not something you do, but something that happens when you get out of the way. Watts reminds us that bamboo grows not because someone pulls it up, but because there is a natural impulse of life operating from within. You are that bamboo. You don't need more effort. You need space. Space for your nature to blossom without interference, without judgment, without fear. When you allow yourself to simply be, what needs to emerge, emerges. What needs to die, dies. Without plans, without goals, without anxiety. And this surrender is not passivity. On the contrary, it is an act of extreme courage. It requires looking in the mirror and saying, I don't know who I am, and that's okay. It requires dropping the masks, abandoning the characters, dismantling the ready-made scripts. It means opening yourself to life in its rawest and also truest form. Control promises you security, but surrender gives you freedom. And here arises an inevitable question. If I am not this self-improver, this inner judge, this builder of idealized versions, then who am I really? If stopping trying to transform myself reveals my essence, what essence is that? What lies beyond conditioning, narratives, imposed identities? It is exactly this question that we will explore in the next and final part, the definitive deconstruction of the illusion that you are broken. The revelation that you already are right now, complete, whole, and enough. And how accepting this can be the most revolutionary act of your existence. Everything you believe to be a flaw, a character defect, a dark part that needed to be overcome, may never have been a real problem. Perhaps it was just life trying to express itself through you in a way that the world was not ready to embrace. The disconcerting truth that Alan Watts pushes us to face mercilessly is this: you were never broken. The pain you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a call, a reminder that you are still alive, that there are parts of you begging to be heard, not fixed. Your doubts, your impulses, your anxiety, your flaws, none of this makes you less human. It makes you human, period. What truly hurts you are not these internal states, but the idea that you shouldn't feel them. The shame of being lost, the fear of not being enough, the exhaustion of constantly trying to fit into an invisible mold. Culture has taught you to live under constant surveillance, as if you are always in debt to an ideal of yourself that never materializes. But this ideal is a ghost, a mirage that recedes every time you try to reach it. Watts calls us to awaken from this nightmare, not with violence, but with clarity. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to allow yourself to exist, fully, with everything you are. And this does not mean resignation. It is not giving up on evolution, nor romanticizing pain. It is, in fact, the opposite of that. It is realizing that true evolution begins the moment you stop resisting what already is. When you accept that there is no arrival, only flow, only now. The present with all it carries, beauty, noise, disorder, silence, is all that exists. The rest is an invention of the mind. You have spent years fighting against yourself. And perhaps you didn't even realize how much this war has drained you. But now you have the chance to end the conflict, to come home, to breathe without judgment, to feel without correction, to be without needing to prove. This is not passivity, this is liberation. So stop. Silence the voice that says you need to be better, stronger, wiser. It is lying. You are not broken, you never were, and life never demanded that you be anything other than what you are now. If this video touched you in some way, if it provoked some discomfort or clarity, write in the comments, "I was never broken." I want to know who had the courage to face this truth head-on. Share this video with someone who lives trying to fix themselves and has forgotten that they are already enough. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. And remember, this is just the beginning. The next video is an essential continuation of this conversation. Don't skip, don't delay. Keep watching. I'll see you there.